Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Katherine Marshall. I'm speaking from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Welcome you to this important webinar. We're talking about Jewish-Catholic relationships at a critical moment where we have three anchor points: Nostra Aetate, the events of October 7th, 2023, and the succeeding violence and efforts at peace. And finally, we're in the moment of the death of Pope Francis, the mourning and the reflections on the meaning of his life. This event has several extraordinary panelists. We're delighted to welcome you. There is a recording that will be available, and we welcome your questions in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So with that, I will turn this first to Ambassador Evrony, who is at Georgetown University now in the Center for Jewish-Christian Relationships, but he has a long history in the Israeli Foreign Service, including as the ambassador to the Holy See and to many others, and is deeply immersed, deeply versed in these questions. So over to you, Ambassador.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Professor Marshall, for moderating this webinar. Let me start by expressing our sorrow and sadness on the passing of Pope Francis. Our condolences to all our Catholic friends. During my time as ambassador of Israel to the Holy See, I had the privilege of meeting Pope Francis a number of times and accompanied him on his visit to Israel. He was a humble man who cared about the poor, the refugees, the sick, and the elderly. He fought for peace and justice. He was a friend of the Jewish people, a persistent fighter against anti-Semitism, and an advocate of Jewish-Catholic dialogue. He said that not recognizing Israel's right to exist is anti-Semitism. He visited Israel and the Great Synagogue in Rome. He jokingly once told me, "They say that I meet more Jewish groups than Catholic groups." When Mr. Jonathan Lincoln, the director of the Center for Jewish Civilization, approached me a few weeks ago to organize this important webinar, I thought it was a great idea. I want to commend him for the initiative and the collaboration with the Berkley Center and its director, Professor Tom Benshoff. We are privileged to be joined by four leading voices who have each made extraordinary contributions to deepening the relationship between Jews and Catholics over many years. They will be introduced after my brief remarks. The period before October 2023 was rightly described as the golden age of Jewish-Catholic relations. We hope this gathering can serve as an opportunity for reflection, but more importantly, the renewal of dialogue and friendship. We pray for the end of the terrible war in Gaza, the return of the hostages, and the end of suffering of both Israelis and Palestinians. This webinar is beyond a mere academic discussion. I believe it is the first real Jewish-Catholic dialogue after October 2023, and therefore very significant. Recent comments from the late Pope Francis regarding the ongoing war in Gaza caused pain among some in the Jewish community and in Israel, and created tension between Jews and Catholics. It is precisely because of this moment of tension that we have gathered today, not to ignore it, but to confront it honestly, to listen deeply, and to consider how we can move forward together without abandoning the values that have underpinned our relationship. Focusing briefly on the future, I hope an invitation will be extended to the new Pope to visit Israel soon, like his three predecessors, and to visit the Great Synagogue of Rome. A dialogue in Jerusalem, between the highest levels of the Vatican and Israel on the war and on the economic agreement that is stalled could help create a better understanding and renewed friendship. This is a moment to reinvest in the relationship, not to retreat from it. I invite you all to listen deeply, reflect thoughtfully, and consider how we might all contribute to renewing the path of dialogue, even amid misunderstanding and tension. So now I would like to turn it back to Professor Marshall, who will introduce Archbishop Pace, and we are looking forward to his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those very thoughtful comments. We're going to do very brief introductions so we have more time for exchange, dialogue, and listening. But it is a great honor to have with us Archbishop Flavio Pace at a time that must be extraordinarily busy for him. And I'll introduce him simply as the Secretary of the Vatican's Dicastery for Promoting Christian Unity. He's been there since February 2024 and has had many positions before that. Over to you, Archbishop.
Thank you to you all, and I appreciate very much this initiative, and I appreciate also your understanding because now we are planning to welcome, to host all the delegation from the Orthodox and Protestant world, but also I appreciate that the Jewish world will be present at the funeral with some special attention because it's Shabbat, but not only from Italy, but from other part of the world. Someone will come, and this is a clear answer to some difficulties, misunderstanding of the past month. And this is a real great appreciated by the Catholic Church, and it's a sign for the world. Because as the ambassador and dear friend Zion mentioned, this is a time to go deep in our relation, not to be divided, but when sometimes happen some difficulties in a family, because I feel that we are a family, that in a family we have to discuss, to listen to each other, to meet more frequently, not to stop the meetings, but to develop more meetings, many other initiative, because we have not to follow the understanding of some part of the world that because there are some tension, we stop the discussion. We need to stay together because the sufferance of Israeli people is our suffering, and the suffering of every innocent people is the suffering of all the human beings. And that is the first of all, this appreciation for the initiative, and also the appreciation for the presence and the messages for the condolences of because of the death of Pope Francis, and also to the possibility to offer a clear sign in front of the world, in front of our listeners, to be together and to restart in a new, deep way, our relation. I was thinking before knowing the death of Pope Francis for sure, and I was speaking with some Jewish friend here in Rome. I was impressed because in the Easter Vigil, there is a fundamental part of the liturgy of the Catholic Church, the so-called preconio, so the announcement of the resurrection. And in the prayer of this night, we say, this is the night when once you led our forebears, Israel children, from slavery in Egypt and made them pass dry shod through the Red Sea. So in the liturgy, where in the past we have discussion, for sure, understandable discussion about the prayer of the Good Friday, but never mentioning the prayer of the Easter Vigil. This is the identity of the Christian world. And in the prayer, we say, we recognize that the Israel children are our father, our forebears. The impressive of the liturgy that we recognize, like in Nostra Aetate, but the liturgy was before Nostra Aetate. The text of the Preconio, the announcement, was before Nostra Aetate. So there was difficulties for the prayer of the Good Friday, changed, thanks God. But never anybody, nobody speaks about the liturgy of the Easter Vigil that recognize in a clear way that we are following the Israeli children. We are part. We feel descendants of the promise, and we cannot stop this relation. We cannot cut the relation because we are in this case we are cutting our body because we feel part of one body. That is important. Offer this sign that is not only a word but a reality, because my identity as a Christian starts with the announcement of the resurrection, for sure. But in the announcement of the resurrection, I feel that in the body of my Christian heritage, I have to live. But what I have is not a must. Is a wish. Is a beauty. Is a blessing. Part of the blessing to be together as one body with different some positions, some tension, but because we are one body, one family, and we need to go deep in our relation.
Thank you so much, Your Grace. That was very inspiring and a call to continuing dialogue. Let me now turn to Rabbi Abraham Skorka, also at Georgetown University now, but he is originally from Argentina and has had a long-standing relationship with Pope Francis. They wrote a book together, and I think he has a profound understanding of his teaching and writes often about it. So over to you, Rabbi Skorka.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this very important event. First and foremost, I would like to share with you my deep grief for the loss of a good friend. I remember that when he was elected Pope, I really hesitated a lot to say, "Oh, the Pope is my friend," and of course, afterwards, this became a very natural expression. But the answer to this expression I found in his last book, in his autobiography named Hope. On page 210 in the English edition appears his, he devoted half of a page, 3/4 of a page to our relationship. And I feel that this is an answer to my hesitations. It was very, very well. It was very clear. It was very well for him, according to what he wrote in this very special book, in which he is passing over all his beloveds and all the and the many people that he met in his life and produced on him an impact. So now, in this moment, I would like also to react to what I heard from Ambassador Evrony and from Monsignor Pace, because this remind me very interesting points. Ambassador Evrony said, this is a golden age for the Jewish-Catholic relations. 2 years after the pilgrimage of the Pope to Israel, in which I took, thanks God, a very important part, because I was the one I served as a bridge between Paris and and Francis. So I met President Perez, and he gave me a book from him with dedication. And the dedication, he said, this is a moment in which never before we had such close relationships between the Catholic Church and the Jewish people. The second point is what Ambassador Evrony commented about the expression of the Pope that each person who denies the right of existence of the people of Israel, but the whole phrase begins, each person who denies the right of existence of the Jewish people and of the existence of the people of Israel, of the state of Israel, can be defined as an anti-Semite. This he sent me in a mail. I transmit this to, let us talk about anecdotes, to Ambassador Evrony. And I remember how many times he insisted me, please give me the exact translation of the words. It was a great statement. I can give a testimony about his deep commitment and fight against anti-Semitism. In his last message of Urbi et Orbi on last Sunday, he said, I am shocked, Francis said, I am shocked about the terrible wave that we are seeing in anti-Semitism in the world. And I have literally documents to prove his answer and his attitude, his fighting attitude against anti-Semitic events that occurred in the past. Monsignor Pace said, we are followers of Israel, children, we are very specially connected. I have another anecdote about that. When he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires, I invited him twice to my congregation, Bnei Tikva, for a very special service in which we prepared ourselves asking forgiveness from God, preparing in this way ourselves to the day of in which God judges all humanity, which is in Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the year. And his messages were not simple messages. His messages were not, okay, I am here to congratulate you, to be with you. No, they were theological pieces. And on the second time, that on the second message, as well in the first, but in the second, it's more stressed the idea, I am with you, both of messages. He spoke as a rabbi about the meaning of teshuvah. And in the second message, he stressed that in a more emphatical way. I remember that we took him to his home from Bnei Tikva. This is a service that begins 11 in the night and finishes 12:30 in the night. So we took him, my wife and me, to the cathedral. And he said several times, repeated, I prayed together with you. When I reread this speech last days ago, I discovered what he spoke as a Jew, but praying to the God according the vision of the so-called New Testament, of the vision of Jesus. His relationship with the Jews was very, very, very special. And regarding, in order to finish, some commentaries regarding the war, I was in touch with him during the war. We exchanged emails, and afterwards we talked about the war on June the 13th. When was the last time that we were face to face together? He was a very impulsive person. He suffered a lot with what occurred to the Palestinians and to the Israelis. He, in one email, wrote to me, I know that the hostages are suffering a lot. So he was in some way in contact. If we would like to know exactly the feeling of my dear friend, we have to see to pay attention to his words in his last message for Easter. He spoke about anti-Semitism. He demanded the immediate liberation of all the hostages. He said, I am suffering a lot for the suffering of Israelis and Palestinians, and I have a special feeling to the suffering of the Palestinians. He tried to maintain an equilibrium. Okay, on several opportunities, he was, as I said, a very impulsive person, and he spoke from his heart immediately. He was not, he refused to use a pure diplomatic, cold language. He was a great person.
Thank you, Rabbi Skorka, for that very personal witness to both your friendship, but also to the power of a remarkable leader, and to this sense of family that I think was evoked in the opening comments. We'll turn now to Rabbi David Sandmel, who's the president of the International Council of Christians and Jews, and has a very long history of involvement in the different forms of dialogue. He's a professor, but also a civic leader. Over to you. Unmute.
And what I usually say after I unmute myself is that most people prefer me muted. So again, thank you to Ambassador Evrony for inviting me to be part of this illustrious panel. And I also want to add my condolences both to Dr. Cunningham and to Archbishop Pace, and also to you, Avi, for your loss. I'm going to take a slightly broader perspective and talk. While I'm going to talk some about the Pope, I'm going to talk more about the present state of relations between Jews and Christians. Clearly, the death of Pope Francis has led people to step back from the current moment and to consider his entire pontificate. And while there has been a lot of criticism of the Pope by Jews lately, after his passing, the Jewish world has almost unanimously responded with praise for the Pope as a man of peace and a true friend of the Jewish people. And this Avi spoke very eloquently about this. This is, I think, a very important indication of the current state of Jewish-Catholic relations. But of course, relations between Jews and Catholics are multifaceted. Since October 7th, a lot of attention has been focused on what the Pope and others at the Vatican have done or said about the war between Israel and Hamas. Every remark or gesture is scrutinized and analyzed. There have been a series of comments or lack of comment or gestures, missteps, perceived missteps by the Pope and other officials that have angered Jewish and Israeli leaders and provoked accusations of anti-Israeli bias or anti-Semitism, or both, to the point that John Allen, writing in Crux, recently described it as a mounting crisis. Without going into the details of each incident, in my view, in some cases the criticism has been justified, but certainly not all. The Pope at times demonstrated certain lack of understanding, I would say, of Jewish sensitivities, or perhaps hypersensitivities is better now, or used ineloquent or inflammatory language when precision, or again, what Avi referred to as diplomatic language, might have been better. But again, he's a person who spoke from the heart. And of course, his particular perspective on power and politics were also a factor. The unfortunate use of John 8:44 highlights the persistence of references that shouldn't be used, at least when Jews are involved. But while all of this has brought to the surface important areas of misunderstanding and miscommunication that I think have to be addressed, I have not seen any fundamental change in the Vatican's position on relations either with the Jews or with the State of Israel. Now, another facet of Jewish Catholic relations is the unfolding of Catholic teaching about Jews and Judaism since Nostra Aetate, the document that began the dramatic process of the Church's reconsideration of its relationship with the Jewish tradition and the Jewish people. That process continues today, including in Pope Francis's own writings. For example, his treatment of Jews and Judaism in Evangelii Gaudium. In the context of 60 years of progress of Jewish-Christian relations, these current tensions are troubling and need to be examined closely, ideally in dialogue with one another. But so far, at least, they are, I would say, circumstantial rather than foundational. A third aspect to consider when assessing Jewish-Catholic relations is that there's a lot more to Jewish-Catholic relations than international politics and the latest from the Vatican. Outside Rome, on the level of national bishops' conferences, or local dioceses, or even parishes, as well as at seminaries, especially in places where there are vibrant Jewish communities, relationships continue and even flourish. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops maintains several vibrant dialogues with the Jewish community. Centers of Jewish-Christian relations thrive at Catholic colleges and universities. Conferences regularly bring Jewish and Christian scholars together to examine the most contentious issues and problematic texts and controversies. For example, I recently participated in a conference on the archives of the pontificate of Pius XII. And here we are having this discussion now. So, we have to remember that Catholic-Jewish relations are not a one single sort of element, but rather a complex of various relations, and that's extraordinarily important. My last word, Jewish-Catholic relations, especially on the international level, have been strained since October 7th. This is significant and should not be ignored. Confronting it may lead to some difficult conversations, but if we do it well, it can also lead to important learning and a deeper understanding of one another. Yes, this is a challenging time, but I think the foundation of Jewish-Catholic relations is solid, and the example of Pope Francis should inspire all of us.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Sandmel, for, I think, setting the challenge in the broader context and recognizing both the assets and some of the challenges that lie ahead. The fourth panelist that we're introducing is Philip Cunningham, Professor Philip Cunningham, who's a professor of theology and the co-director of the Institute of Jewish-Catholic Relations at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. He has a long background in biblical studies and religious education, focusing on theologies of both Christian and Jewish. Over to you, Professor.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks also to Ambassador Evrony for the invitation. Since we've heard several anecdotes about Pope Francis, whose passing shocked me because it seemed he was on the mend after his hospitalization, let me just tell a very brief one. In 2015, for the 50th anniversary of Nostra Aetate, I happened to be president of the International Council of Christians and Jews, an office that David currently holds, Rabbi Sandmel. And we had our meeting in Rome to mark the anniversary, and had the privilege of a private audience, if you can call the Pope meeting 280 people a private audience. But he, and I think Rabbi Skorka was helpful in this regard as well, he personally shook the hands of every single one of the members of the ICCJ who were present. Since I was president at the time, I had the privilege of addressing Pope Francis on behalf of the ICCJ. And as we all sat after his remarks for a photograph of the entire group, which I wasn't expecting, I had the opportunity to sit right next to him as he was in the center aisle of the hall. And I leaned over, not realizing what was exactly happening, and said, I want to thank you for your kindness in welcoming everybody personally and individually. And he leaned over to me and he made this gesture and he said, "It's about togetherness." And that is what I heard Archbishop Pace emphasize in his comments a few minutes ago. And that will always stick with me as a priority for our late Pope. With that, let me make a few comments. I'd like to sort of bounce off of something the ambassador said at the beginning, which will also echo something Rabbi Sandmel just said about there having been a golden age of Catholic-Jewish relations. And when I hear the word age or epoch or era, I naturally think in terms of long centuries of time. So to put the current moment of our relationship into that context, that larger context, I assume the golden age that we're speaking about began more or less with the issuance of Nostra Aetate in 1965. And so the age that preceded it was something on the order of 1,800 years in duration. A long period of time when Jews and Catholics and other Christians were estranged from each other, misunderstood each other. Occasionally there was Christian violence, and certainly social separation of Jews and Christian societies and so on. So we are only today in 2025, as we're preparing to mark the 60th anniversary of Nostra Aetate, we are only at as Cardinal Walter Kasper said a few years ago, we are only at the beginning of the Golden Age. I don't think the Golden Age has come to an end with the events of October 7th. As tragic as they are and as horrible as the aftermath has been, we are still only at the beginning of our new relationship, which Pope Francis called a journey of friendship that is accompanied by the Holy Spirit. And I think that is something we all need to keep in mind in these times of turmoil. We have a lot of work to do still in both of our communities in sort of deprogramming people from received stereotypes that they have of each other, often unthinkingly get triggered depending on events that are happening around folks. Here's an example of something quite recently, just an example. So there have been several memorial masses around the world for the soul of Pope Francis and praying for him. It's interesting that we happen to be in the octave of Easter, as it's called, the 8 days after Easter Sunday. And the assigned lectionary reading for Tuesday of that week, the first reading is from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 3, in which the Apostle Peter, in the Lucan presentation, urges his Jewish audience to hear the gospel that he is announcing, and mentions that they were responsible for the death of Jesus. Well, this presents a very awkward context to be inviting Jewish leaders to the Catholic liturgy to honor Pope Francis, to have them hear the kind of the original form, so to speak, of the deicide charge that took such a horrible stature later in the Christian tradition. So this is an example in the precise moment we are in of how do we as Catholics encourage in our prayer, in our education, in our lives, the reverence for the Jewish tradition and for those who are like us covenanting with the God of Israel. How can we nurture that in a constant way that that will be transformative in the long term? And I'll just end on that note with that reminder that the golden age is only just beginning. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor Cunningham. And thanks to all of you for very heartfelt and very honest discussion that presents both the golden age, the challenges that lie before us, all set, I think, within the broader context of both history and of present realities. We're now turning to a time of question and answer, which are to be addressed to the four panelists. So let me start with one from Ron Kronish. Do any of you think that some of the reactions by some Jews and some Israeli leaders to Pope Francis's criticisms of Israel's actions in the current war have been over-exaggerated and bordering on anti-Catholic sentiment, even accusing the Pope of being an anti-Semite? So that's the first question that's come from the Q&A, and I do encourage people to put their questions into the Q&A box. So who would like to take that? Archbishop Pace, do you want perhaps to venture into that?
Yes, thanks. I try to enter in this, but I know about the reaction. I cannot quote there is an anti-Catholic sentiment for sure. The Pope Francis was a man very free to speak. I remember also I was in Rome serving the other dicastery for Eastern churches in the commemoration of the 1 century of the 2015 about the Armenian genocide. And I remember he quoted, because I am not against people, a government, but when I was in Argentina, we used to call this event as a genocide. I'm not an international court. In Argentina, we feel that the events for the Armenian was a genocide. So he quoted at the beginning of the celebration this expression for the Armenians with some reaction. I think that the reality for Pope Francis, we cannot say that it is anti-Semitic for sure, because the presence here of Rabbi Abraham is a clear witness that is a friend of the Jewish people, and is a friend also of the existence of the state of Israel. Nobody speak about against the existence of Israeli state for sure, and for Pope Francis. So I can understand some reaction, because if I will be in the other part, some reaction to some to some so-called expression, because sometimes it was not clear expression, but quotation of some expression, so with a bit misunderstanding. Some expression of Pope Francis was from his heart, not against someone, but trying to protect some others. So when I supporting someone, it's not the reason that I'm against the others. So because I am serving the human beings with no distinction about when a person is an innocent person, is a baby, the two child of the family of the hostages is a terrible, is a crazy reaction. These two bodies, these two babies offered back dead to their family. So it's a very, very crazy and full situation. So I think that is not an anti-Catholic quotation, but we for sure is Pope Francis was not anti-Semitic expression. Yes, there is also about the first question of Marco Ferrario, what is the legitimate defense according to the moral vision of the Catholic Church? Yes, there is the possibility of the legitimate defense, but there is also the proportion. There is the proportion. There is the rule of the legitimate defense, but there is the proportion. I have to preserve myself or my state, but with a clear proportion. It's not a problem of number, 1 or 10, 1 or 100, 1 or 1,000, but the proportion. And also calling for the responsibility if someone is not protecting his people because putting someone not innocent among the innocents, is also the responsibility for the other part. But if it's true that there are in the midst of the innocent and non-innocent and a terrorist, but the reality of the proportion, and with the technology and with also the development of the military forces, we can do something better, I think.
Thank you so much. I think it's a very interesting theme through this discussion, the difference between the language of the heart and the language of diplomacy, and trying to understand what's really behind it. I see Professor Cunningham's hand.
Yes, thanks very much. And just to piggyback on the Archbishop's comments, with which I totally agree. I want to say that in terms of the dialogue, so-called, in terms of the relationship, one of the things that the war in the Middle East has brought to the surface are some dynamics that we've always known existed. And so, for example, it's clear, I mean, it's sort of obvious, but now it's staring us in the face, that in general, and generalities are always dangerous, but in general, Jews and Catholics have different historical memories. We approach things that are happening in our world today because of different experiences that are in our communities. So just again, quick examples. The Jewish community cannot forget, nor should it, that 2/3 of the European Jewish population were wiped out in the Shoah. That's a visceral reality that is going to be present forever, probably. I won't draw conclusions from that other than to say that the Catholic community at large does not share that experience. And likewise, as the Archbishop said, we have our traditions of just war theory that are on our minds as Catholics, that are in the world of nuclear weapons and biochemical weapons and all kinds of mass destructive capabilities, has to inform how we approach conflicts anywhere. So again, a difference of perspective that is historically driven. We need to understand each other's context better. And that again is a sweeping observation, but I think we've seen it revealed in recent events.
Gorka, do you want to make any comment here? Or
yes.
David?
Yes, I would like to say to add some comments to this point. From one side, I consider that all the negative expressions in this very moment, in this sad moment, because undoubtedly Francis was a great leader, a great seeker for peace, delivering such kind of negative comments regarding him is not right. It's not correct. In this moment, you have to see the whole picture, who he was, how he behaved towards Jews, and not to concentrate on one word or on some expressions. I exchange. I had a written dialogue. I exchanged emails about the use of the word genocide. In one of his answers, he wrote, look, maybe that I wasn't so accurate using this word, but you have to know that I received this information and this, and he to the email he added some attachments with commentaries from Jewish professors criticizing the Israeli military behavior in Gaza. He told me this is my this was the reason that moved me to say that. The other point that I would like to say is, again, he spoke from his heart. He was a very, very passionate person. Not only in this conflict, he committed some kinds, in quotation signs, of errors. Also in the Russian-Ukrainian war, he had he gave some commentaries here and there, but when he used to finish his speeches in Buenos Aires in the cathedral on the celebrating the independence of Argentina, I always used to approach to him and to say to him, look, you are talking in a prophetical language, and tomorrow in the papers are going to explain your words through a political optics. A prophet, and he had some sparks of prophetism, is a polarized person, is not a person that has the quality to be absolutely equilibrated. He's a person of passion. In one of the emails that he sent me in the middle of the war, he told me, I am doing the best. I am working. I am this, that, and afterwards, and also the Secretary of State. He didn't work in a coordinated way with the Secretary of State. I learned from this email. He transmitted his passion, his message, and okay, the diplomatic ways he left to the Secretary of State. Okay, it was a little bit not so prolix, but it's a sign of his passion, of his truth, and of his deep religiosity.
Thank you. We're coming towards the end of this session, and there are a number of questions which we'll try to respond to later. But I want to highlight one, which is, what can Jews and Catholics do together to advance peace between Palestinians and Israelis as people of faith? And I would extend that more broadly. But what I'm going to suggest is that each of the panelists would have 2 minutes to either raise any questions with each other or to leave behind some final thoughts. So I'll start with the Archbishop and go in the same order that we had before. So, Archbishop.
No, I think it's not a question, but just a reflection. we feel that we are four different point of view, four different experiences, but we are, except Professor Philip, I have the occasion to meet personally Rabbi Abraham, Rabbi David, and the former services ambassador, Ambassador and Professor Zion. And this is just a clear message that we are together on the same path. And the importance of Rabbi Abraham is quoting the Argentina, the time of Argentina of the Pope Cardinal Bergoglio, but also in the relation with the Pope, is the personal experience. He is a Jewish, is a rabbi, but this experience is a clear message, and the quotation of some dialogue, of some email, some discussion, is a proof that with a friend, you have to be sincere because you are friend. And if Rabbi Abraham is sharing with us this experience, is a clear sign that in the heart of Pope Francis, there was a reality, there was the truth of his life. And so other quotation, and also the importance of is the last reflection about the prophetism, the prophecy of Pope Francis. He respects the diplomacy, he respects the Secretary of State, he respects the service of the other dicastery, other offices, but in some expression, in some sign, in some clear witness, he was speaking from his heart and following of the inspiration of the Spirit to him as a successor of Peter and the father for the Catholic Church, but we feel that a kind of father of the humanity.
Thank you so much. Rabbi Skorka?
In the book of Proverbs appears the verse that says, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. The memory of the tzaddik, of the righteous person, is for a blessing. And the blessing will be if the next, the elected pope will, on the field of the Jewish Catholic dialogue, I don't like to enter into what he is going to do with the church, because this is a very wide and it's not my field, but in the field that I worked a lot with Francis of blessed memory, that the blessing that this verse is talking about undoubtedly will be the continuation. And I agree with what Professor Cunningham said, that we are standing on the, I would say, on the threshold of a golden age. Let God bless us to enter into the house of the golden dialogical age between Jews and all the Christian denominations, and with Islam, and with all the religions in the world, in order to together build up a better reality for human beings.
Thank you. Rabbi Samuel?
Well, the question about what can Jews and Catholics do together to bring peace, that's a tall order, and I think that we have to be realistic about what we can do. But at the same time, I think that whether we're in the middle of the golden age or on the cusp of a golden age, I agree that we are at the beginning, but I also think that the record, the history of the rapprochement between Jews and Christians writ large, and specifically between the Jewish community and the Roman Catholic Church over the last 70 years, demonstrates that a very difficult past, a very painful past, need not be determinative for the future. And if Jews and Christians, after 1,800 years of animosity, can start to refer to each other in using language of siblings and so forth, that is something that I think can be a model for the world. And I think that even images, and here I'm going to, there's a picture of the Pope and Rabbi Skorka together with their arms around one another. Those kinds of images, I think, are incredibly powerful and show people that there is another way of being with one another across religious lines, even if we have differences of theology or differences of opinions. These are things that when we are at our best, we sit together, we talk about them, we hash them out. Maybe it's difficult, but that's what we do. And so I also like to quote the prophets. I like the phrase asirei tikva. We are all prisoners of hope. Things might be bad, but we cannot give up hope. And we have in the pontificate of Pope Francis and in the actions of the people on this call and so many others, witness to the fact that hope can, is not only necessary for human survival, but it can also have real concrete effects in the world.
A wonderfully optimistic and constructive.
I've been accused of being an aspirationalist, and it wasn't meant nicely.
I call myself a cockeyed optimist. Professor Cunningham, any final word? Mute.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, to inject a note of realism, but also I'd like to also end with a quotation of Pope Francis's. The world today is in very difficult straits, and there are forces in the world that, as a personal observation, seem to take delight in promoting division and conflict, particularly, or in a sense of this conversation, along religious lines. And that cannot be the prevailing atmosphere in our world, that religions and religious communities and traditions working with others need to be bringing folks together, not dividing them. And it's going to be a difficult road. I mean, we've got death surrounding us in vast numbers in many parts of the world. And it's going to require all of our religious communities to pull together to impact this. Having said that, I just would like to end with two sentences of Pope Francis's that are really meaningful to me, and I think are almost the baseline for the future in terms of the theology of Catholic understanding of the Jewish people. I'm a theologian, so I'm going to speak theologically. So one of the first things that Francis did when he was elected Pope, within a year, he issued an apostolic exhortation called the Evangelii Gaudium, the light of the gospel. Very broad view of problems in the world and confronting the church and so on. But in terms of Judaism, he said this, which the first sentence had been said before by Popes John Paul II and Benedict, but the second sentence I'm going to quote was a further step. So he wrote, "We hold the Jewish people in special regard because their covenant with God has never been revoked, for," quoting Romans 11, "the gifts and call of God are irrevocable." In the second sentence, a little further on, he says, "God continues to work among the people of the Old Covenant and to bring forth treasures of wisdom which flow from their encounter with his word." Now that is a very significant theological observation, that we Jews and we Christians are both in relationship with the word of God, and we are covenanting with God through our various mediations of God's word. And I think we can never forget that. And I think we must always impart that to our respective communities. And as the anniversary of Nostra Aetate comes up in a few months, I'll point out that this comment from Pope Francis in an apostolic exhortation is a very high level of magisterial authority. In fact, it's the highest since the Second Vatican Council's comment in Nostra Aetate about the relationship of the Catholic community with the Jewish community. So I'm optimistic. We've got a lot of work to do, and the road is going to be difficult, but together we have hope.
Thank you so much. And unfortunately, we've come to the end of what is a fascinating and, as I said before, very honest discussion, really a sense of being within the family at a very special, very sad moment, but also a moment of hope. The recording will be made available. I thank you all to those who posed questions, and we'll try to address them. Let me just see, because we are a bit over time, but whether Ambassador Evrony wants to make a final comment before we close.
I just would like to thank you for the incredible way you moderated this webinar, and thank the panelists for a fascinating discussion, and looking forward to the continuation of the Golden Age.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.